Moving on to the second section of Chapter 2, we are starting to get into some basic statistics, as well as some somewhat more complicated calculations. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to start looking at what are, just sort of some statistics about this table, so about this data in this table. So the first thing that we want to do is calculate the sum or our total monthly expenditures, which we can use the AutoSum function. We can hit equals and put in the range, however you want to do it. I'm lazy, I like to do it with as few clicks as possible, so we use the AutoSum. This gives us 1,496, which is precisely what the example got. And then we want to know the totals from last year and from this year as well. So we can either copy this and paste it, or we can autofill it this way, like that. And there it is. And now, okay, if we take and just autofill this formula out to the percentage of change, that doesn't make sense, right? That then gives us a dollar value of 0, which is not actually what we're looking for. Again, this gets down to the use your common sense kind of thing. So we're going to hit undo there. Our percentage of change, right, is going to be calculated on our totals just the same way that it was last year. So if we just autofill this formula down, it should give us negative 1.7, right? So we spent a little bit less this year. We can see that, 17,950 versus 18,258. So this number makes sense. Everything's good so far. Okay, now, the next thing we need to do is calculate our percentage of the total. So now we have our totals. Now we want to calculate what is the percent of the total monthly budget of $1,496. What percentage of that is spent on our utilities? So that's easy enough to calculate, right? That's our monthly utility bill divided by the total. That'll give us 16.7%, as the example shows. But what happens then, we could autofill everything else, but what happens if we autofill this column right here? Okay, we get these error messages. That means that we're trying to divide by 0. Why? What do we mean? Obviously, mathematically, you can't divide by 0. It's impossible. So let's look and see what is happening here. Okay. What's happening is that this formula, which has autofilled from the top, is automatically dividing this number by the total, except it's shifting down, right? So it's shifting the total down. What we need to do is hold this denominator constant. Now, that's called an absolute cell reference. We want to always divide by the same number. So what we have to do is indicate to Excel that we are always going to be in row 12. We always want to be in row 12 in our denominator. We don't want to go down to row 13. We don't want to go down to row 14 in our denominator, right? So we want to always be looking straight across in the adjacent column in our numerator, but we have to always be looking down into row 12 for our denominator. So what you do is use a absolute cell reference. Now, on a Windows machine, you lucky dogs, you can just hit F4 function, and that'll give you these absolute cell reference indicators. In a Mac, we have to manually go in and put a $sign next to the component of the cell reference that we want to stay the same. So in this case, I want the row number, row 12, to stay the same all the way down. I don't really care about the column. It's going to stay the same because we're just pulling it down from a column. I just want that row number to stay the same. So if I now go ahead and autofill that down, now, right, these formulas, they take the adjacent column and divide it by row 12 all the way down. You see this one now is taking the adjacent column and dividing it by that correct number. And so that'll give us, if we scroll down through here, that'll give us the right numbers. Okay, so absolute cell reference is very, very, very important in using Excel in any meaningful way. Now, the next thing we want to do is some basic statistics. These are descriptive statistics, right? You will remember this from Management 140. Descriptive statistics, so we want to know how many categories we have. Okay, the count function will tell us how many categories there are that are not 0. So I'm going to demonstrate how this works in a minute. So we go count, so equals, and then what you can see is it gives you this this little smart menu there. We want to count how many categories there are in our annual spend. You always have to, when you're referring to a range of cells, you always have to close the parenthesis. Right, so that'll give us 9. So it counted up how many categories there are. Now watch what happens if I empty out that column, that number there. So let's say I didn't spend anything on close. Now the count went down to 8. So the count will give you all of the non-empty values, right? I'm going to hit undo. And undo again. I'm going to make it bigger like I wanted to. All right, there we go. Yep. So now we're back to 9. Okay. So we want to know now what's our average expenditure. Again, our average total bill, which is kind of a meaningless statistics, but that's okay. The average, and again, $19.94 is our average. This book kind of goes into a little bit of excessive detail about how these functions work. It's really not necessary to go through all that. Just do it the easy way. So there's our average, 1994. Minimum and maximum are very similar to average, right? And we would have done this in Management 140 as part of our descriptive statistics, right? So min, it'll open a parenthesis for us. We select the range. Minimum is 1200, our maximum similarly. So what's the budget item that we spend the most on? Okay, it says $3,500, which is for taxes. And now, what's nice is that you can go ahead and when you have a bunch of things that you know you're going to want to duplicate, the most efficient way to do it is to do all your calculations, and then once you've got them all calculated, copy them, paste them, and there it is, right? So there's everything that they had you do for this example. Okay, so now we have our statistics, and now what we can also do is we can sort our data from, sort of the biggest nut, the biggest percentage of our total, to the lowest percentage of our total, if we want. So if we want to go ahead and sort our data by the percentage of total, so the biggest chunk of our budget from highest to lowest. The first thing that you do is take the whole table that you want to sort, right? Because if you just sorted the column, you'd be totally screwed up. You want to move all of this stuff around and sort the whole, all the data that's attached to each category by the percent of total. So when you have done that, right, you can go to the Data tab up here, and you can sort. And you can either choose this detailed menu button, okay. You can sort it by, when you indicate that your list has totals, has headers, it knows that these column headings are the sort of the headers, and so you can tell it to sort by percent of total, and smallest to largest, or how about we do it largest to smallest. Hit OK. Then it sorts it so that your taxes at the highest percentage are up the top, and your miscellaneous is down at the bottom. And here it is, looking the same. Okay. Now, these all are 8.4%, right? They're all $125 a month this year. Since we wanted to sort it on 2 levels, right? So what we want to do is sort it by, let's see. We can sort these on a second level, even though they're the same. We could sort it by last year's spend so we can see what was the highest. So let's redo the sort like this. We're going to sort. We're going to sort the whole thing by percent of total, and then we're going to add a level and say we're going to sort it by last year's expenditures, largest to smallest again. And that'll change the order that these 3 items appear in. There it is. So now we've got vacation on the top of that list. So that's how you do multiple sort levels. And then once you have your data sorted, now you can start thinking about, making some statements about it. Like what they're talking about is that, these top 3 items, they're not really something that you have a lot of control over, right? Taxes, they say there's nothing certain except for death and taxes, right? So you can't really have much control over what is, in fact, your largest single budget item. Your miscellaneous category, it went down a little bit from last year, went down actually a significant amount from last year. So these are sort of more discretionary expenditures, vacation totals as well. So, that's some of the things that you can do, some of the statements that you can make about budgets once you organize them in a manner that makes sense. Okay, that was it for 2.2.